Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Facebook Live from Alzheimer's Orange County. Happy Tuesday, Election Day. My name is Melissa Clave. I'm the Director of Education here at Alzheimer's Orange County, and I'm joined this morning by Ben Allen, one of our Programs and Education Specialists. Good morning, Ben.
Morning, Melissa. Pleasure to be here.
Same here. So today, Ben and I are going to be talking about communication, of course, our favorite topic to discuss. And we're going to kind of take it back to basics, essentially, and really go through kind of some of the fundamentals of, what we go through changes. And how we can positively communicate with them and connect with them. And so we hope this is helpful to you. So a lot of what we'll talk about as always. So anyone watching, please chime in, questions, comments. I see a couple good mornings here. Buenos dias. Good morning, Cindy. And so, sorry, yeah, this one's in English. We do broadcast in Spanish on many Mondays. So we hope that you'll come back and join us for those. But today, I want to start by thanking our sponsor, of course, Crown Cove. Crown Cove is located in Corona del Mar. It's a retirement community offering assisted living and memory care. They have an intimate campus, beautiful location, PCH, overlooking Little Corona del Mar Beach. Residents have a great lifestyle and stunning views of the ocean, lots of amenities, and most importantly, their staff is trained to bring joy and a sense of family to each and every moment by staying focused on what individuals can do and never what they can't do. And that's always a great segue for what we're going to be talking about today, which is focusing on the abilities that remain. Of course, we're going to talk about the real losses that Alzheimer's and dementia do bring and the brain changes. But we're going to talk about how we can get around those and how we can best support individuals with the abilities that they have left. And when it comes to communication, there's a lot that we can do in adjusting our approach, adjusting the environment, and working to make more joy than not, as one of our speakers, Dr. Galindo, loves to say. So let's get into it. Ben and I sometimes like to start by sharing a little bit of our stories. We don't always do this. Ben's better about it than I am, I think. But Ben, do you want to share a little bit about your personal story with your wife,
Sure.
Judy?
Yeah, Judy and I have been married 36 years. About 11 years ago, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And so her symptoms at this point are quite severe. She needs help with every single activity of daily living. And she lives in a long-term care community where she's really getting great care, where they love her and she loves the caregivers there. And so it's really, really sweet. I saw her just day before yesterday and she was doing really great. The picture here was taken about 5 years ago when she was more mobile. She is no longer able to walk. Doesn't talk much at all, and many times doesn't respond to questions. Sometimes it's hard to know whether she knows who I am, and that can be a tough thing to accept. But for me, I know she's getting great care. She is comfortable, she's content, and sometimes she's very, very happy. And so that's the best that I can hope for.
That's great. And I'll share a little bit about my story. Many similarities with my mom and Judy as well. This picture was taken about 3 years ago in 2017. And my mom was in late stage at this point and still is, much more advanced today. But in this picture, she was largely nonverbal in her communication, but she still found ways to communicate with us. And this is during this picture was about 6 years into her journey with Alzheimer's disease, which started around 2011. So, at that point, we'd learned a lot, we'd, experienced a lot, and were able to kind of do the best we could with communication. But you can see, her smile, her touch, she found ways, and we found ways to connect with her and still do to this day. It's a little more challenging now. But, communication is always just so important, and finding those ways when the words aren't there, can be a really difficult adjustment, but that's what we're going to talk about more today. So
Yeah,
hopefully
one of the things on that note, we never lose the need to connect and to express ourselves. And so even though there are times that I don't sense her connecting with me, I can see her connecting with caregivers and other staff in the community where she lives. And another thing that's related to that is we sometimes hear people talk about, their personality has changed, or they're not there anymore. And that just isn't true. We see Judy's personality a lot, and it's really sweet. I mean, there are times that she's just playful. She's just expressing it differently. And so it's our job to adjust to that, and find a way to make a connection. And that's what we're going to talk about.
Absolutely. Well said. So as I mentioned, there are very real changes that happen with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or another type of dementia. And Ben, you do such a great job of walking us through this. So why don't you talk a little bit about this?
Sure. So what we're describing in this illustration are typical symptoms of Alzheimer's disease and many other kinds of dementia. We talk a lot about the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia. Alzheimer's is just one kind or cause of dementia, but it's also the most common form of dementia. About 2/3 of dementia cases are caused by Alzheimer's. And so we tend to talk about Alzheimer's the most. So this is typical, most common symptoms, and I'm going to talk about them in sort of a linear fashion. I'm going to start in the lower right with short-term memory. And the reason we start there is because that's typically the first symptom that we see of Alzheimer's disease. The disease attacks a portion of the brain where memory is seated, and that's called the hippocampus, that structure in the brain. And so as the disease spreads, it destroys the neurons in the brain, and our neurons connect to other neurons to create networks that allow our brain to perform the functions that it does, including memory, thinking, responding to our environment, making decisions, all of those things, and the functions that we're not aware of, our autonomic nervous system, all of those are controlled by the brain. And as the disease spreads, it affects more and more functions in the brain, and ultimately every single function. So short-term memory is typically first. As it spreads, it reaches that region of the temporal lobe where language is seated. And so people begin to have trouble with word finding and completing a thought. And each of those get progressively worse. So, pardon me, I've got a technical problem here. Let me get rid of that. Siri was trying to respond to me.
She's
and now I
in.
just mentioned her name and she's back. Okay, I sent her to her room. So each of these functions gets progressively worse, and the disease spreads throughout the brain and affects additional functions. So when it reaches the frontal lobes of the brain, that's where our rational thought, our ability to think abstractly, to make decisions, to regulate our behavior, all of that is in our frontal lobes, both sides of the brain. And as the disease damages those neurons, thinking becomes more difficult. Thinking can become irrational from our perspective. It may be perfectly reasonable to our loved ones, but not to us. And behavior, we may see new behavior from our loved ones that we never would have seen before, like perhaps inappropriate language, whether it's sexist or racist or aggressive, because they're losing the ability to understand what's normal, what's socially acceptable behavior. The disease continues to spread. It's inexorable. It just continues to damage the brain And we have no way of stopping it at this point. We don't even have any way of slowing it down. So as it reaches the part of the brain where we regulate our emotions, there can be swings of moods that are startling to us. From happy to very, very sad and discouraged, and we don't understand that. And so the more we understand about how the disease is affecting the brain, the easier it is for us to adjust, to recognize that these are changes in their brain, they're functional changes. It's not something that they can control. They're doing the best they can, and it's tough. It is a really hard life as they're trying to hold things together, but it's getting more and more difficult. Now, as the disease spreads, it reaches that part of the brain where we interpret our senses, all the sensory information that's coming in through our eyes, our ears, our nose, our taste, our sense of touch. All of that can be affected and distorted because the brain isn't functioning properly. Vision especially can be distorted and can result in hallucinations. That is, they're seeing something, or in some cases hearing something that wasn't there, but as far as they're concerned, it's very real. And we just have to find a way to go along with that, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Lastly, in this illustration, and usually this is very late in the disease, the damage to the brain impacts the brain stem, where our major functions, our major body organ function is affected, and our reflexes like swallowing. And so swallowing becomes more and more difficult. And so soft foods, liquids, or even thickened liquids, because just swallowing water can become difficult. So those are the major changes. And as I mentioned, I described them in a pretty linear fashion, and it's not that simple. This is a gross oversimplification. There can be a lot of differences, a lot of variabilities from person to person, and the time frame can vary widely. For some people, it can be very rapid. That is, from diagnosis to end of life can be 3, 4, 5 years. Others can be as much as 20 years. And we don't know what makes the difference, and we don't know how to predict it.
Yeah. Thanks for walking us through that. Yeah, I think one of the most important things, just as a takeaway from this, is, like you said, they're doing the best they can with what they have. They're experiencing very real changes that we can't see. I think that's one of the hardest things about this, and especially in my personal experience with my mom, because she was so young and looked so young, and her appearance never really changed, except in kind of the later stages of the disease. And so it's hard to remember constantly that, there are very real changes happening that I can't see. And a lot of times she is experiencing a different reality than we are. And so instead of getting frustrated or angry, which is such a natural reaction when, someone isn't understanding you or is getting upset with you, to kind of, become more of a detective, and figure out, why might they be saying that, or why might they be feeling this way? And we'll talk about that as we talk about the environment and our approach, as we continue on. So love this. Want to talk about this?
Sure. One of the most important things that we need to recognize is that with the decline of their language capability, words become less important. And what's more important is body language and tone of voice. And it's pretty dramatic. Some research that was done at UCLA shows that only about 7% of the message is determined, that is the successful communication. What actually gets across, only about 7% is from the words that we use. About 38% is through our tone of voice. So that's really important. And 55% from our body language. And we need to be aware of our body language, that it's not just our posture, it's our gestures and our facial expressions. All of that goes into body language and communicates very powerfully. And so if I'm feeling frustrated, maybe I'm angry, that's going to come across whether I verbalize it or not. And so I need to be aware of it. I need to take time to take a breath and slow down and just focus on what's important. And conversely, their body language communicates to us. And so we need, as you said, we need to become detectives. We need to be observant and watch what's happening. Watch where their focus is. What are they looking at? What, are they fidgeting? All of those things can tell us if they need something, or they're trying to express something that they simply can't put in words.
Yeah, I think my favorite part about this study is that it applies to all of us. This is not a dementia-specific study, and it always blows me away. I mean, I've seen this study now. We talk about it lots of times. It always amazes me that really only 7% is the words. And I think a lot of times about our text messages and our emails that don't have the benefit of body language and tone of voice. This is a little bit of an aside, but in modern times right now, and especially as we're distanced, those things are just still that the importance of our body language and our tone doesn't go away. So we need to find other ways to convey, those emotions. But yeah, with our loved ones with Alzheimer's disease, I mean, the first thing they're losing along with short-term memory is a lot of the words, a lot of the nouns, and a lot of, word finding abilities. And so this study, I think, tells us that, we have a lot to work with still. We have, over 90% of our communication is not really about the words. And they still have that, and they might even, that ability might even grow in them as they're losing the words. They might be able to pick up on our tone and our body language even more than they did before, because that sense is kind of heightened. So I think this is a good thing for us, and something, that works in our favor. All right, so we're going to go through what we call the compassionate approach, and there's 5 steps. They're not necessarily linear steps in an order, but each of them has its own importance in terms of how we relate to our loved ones. And so I think this one is the most important one to start with, the environment. So Ben, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, the environment, we need to think about the environment in lots of different settings. In this illustration, this father and son probably are outside, and there can be lots of hazards outside that we might notice and just without even thinking avoid. But our loved ones may not see those, or they may be distracted and then trip over something, have a fall, an injury. And so we want to avoid that. So we want to look for hazards, recognizing their limitations. So that the reason that I spent so much time talking about the brain changes is that I need to understand that in order to anticipate the challenges that my loved one may have, whether that's obstacles that we need to avoid and we need to watch out for them on their behalf, or other factors. If we walk into a room and it's just too dark or too bright and glare or too noisy or too cluttered, whatever the obstacle might be that impairs our ability to connect, we want to find that, change it if we can, use the environment for our purpose as we think about what do we want to accomplish. What do I want my loved one to know? I mean, I want Judy to know that she's loved, that she's safe, that she's going to be cared for. That's our purpose. That's what we want to communicate in everything that we do. And so watching out in the environment, anticipating, making it as conducive as possible to whatever it is that we're hoping to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. I think distractions are such a big one, and we don't think about them because, as you said, we're just able to tune them out. I think a lot of times about, this is a good example that you have here with this picture and the walking. There's actually, so I'm a physical therapist, and there's a test we do, we call it the walkie-talkie test. And so if someone's walking and they're having to engage in a cognitive activity, their walking speed will slow down, or the speed of them doing the cognitive activity will slow down. So you test each separately, their walking speed and, however they do this cognitive activity, and then you do them together, and something's got to give. And so with Alzheimer's disease, especially, or another type of dementia, if you're having this conversation and you're walking around outside, I mean, I love going for walks outside and talking, but just be aware, if you're doing that with your loved one, that, their walking may become a little bit unsafe, or they may need more time to respond to you in the conversation. Those things we often do without thinking about it. Other places that this, I think, often comes into play are in the bathroom. If you're trying to assist with personal care, the bathroom can be full of just, terrible noises, essentially. I mean, the acoustics, running water, if there's a TV somewhere in the background, and that noise can get amplified. And that can just make that task just immensely more difficult than it needs to be, rather, kind of quieting down, paying attention to the sounds, maybe having some light music, or something that just, is calming that atmosphere. Again, these are things that we don't think about because we're just trying to get through whatever task it is. But as you mentioned, the light, the temperature, the busyness, the clutter, all of those things can just set you off on not a great footing to then try and communicate or have a conversation. So it's lots to think about, but in the long run, it will save you time and, make that connection just that much better if you're able to control those factors that you do have control over. All right, adjust and improvise.
So again, based on what we observe, we make changes to the environment if we can. And it may be that our loved one isn't responding to things the way we anticipated. And if I have a one-track mind, I'm gonna follow this plan, this thought, whatever it is, and it's not working, then I need to adjust. I need to do something different. And improvising is a really important skill. We just go along with what's happening with the goal of helping our loved ones to be engaged, connected with us, and content. We call that contented engagement, and that's our goal. We don't want our loved ones to be bored. We don't want them to be overstimulated. We want to find that zone where they can be content, and that's going to require adjustment. And my way may not work, and so I need to be flexible.
Yeah, when I think about this one, I think about just literally kind of reading the room. And we do that kind of in the first step of checking the environment, but I think also this kind of makes it extend to our loved one, and what are they feeling? And you always talk about this, Ben, I like the way you discuss it. When you walk into a room and you see Judy, before you kind of approach her, you look and you think, okay, what's she feeling right now? Is she down? Is she up? How can I kind of match, the emotion that she's feeling and kind of join in that with her and make her feel validated.
Yeah, to respond to the emotion is really important, not just ignore it, not just try to move on to something else, but recognize it, acknowledge it. That's part of their need to express their feelings, is that they need to know that they're being heard. Yeah. And so we have to take time to do that.
Yeah, I think we all know kind of when we're getting the brush off by someone else, and especially they will as well. I think our tendency might be, oh, they look sad or upset, I just want to jump in there and kind of change the mood. And if you skip that really important step of validating what they're feeling, you're always going to be kind of circling that and coming back to that. It's never going to quite get resolved because, they're never going to feel heard and like you understand. So they're going to try and find other ways to make you understand what they're feeling. That feeling isn't necessarily just going to go away on its own, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Facilitating a connection. How do we do that?
Lots of ways to facilitate a connection, but I really like this image because one of the most important things is eye contact. So in this case, the the woman has positioned herself where the man has full facial contact. He can see her and vice versa. That's so important. And also, we don't want to be standing above someone. So she's really done this so well. And we also notice that she's using a gentle, appropriate touch, and that can communicate powerfully. I mean, in my mind, it says, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, you have my full attention. And that speaks very powerfully to our loved ones, that we really care what's happening in their mind and their heart.
Yeah, I like what Teepa Snow says about this too, and she has a lot of great videos on touch. And she says that, you know, if you're trying to have a conversation with someone, you know, and you need to be close to them, or you're helping them with a personal care task and you need to be close, it's pretty awkward to be really close to someone without having some kind of touch with them that kind of, you know, connects you. Without that, it's kind of like you're just in each other's personal space. So she does a really good job of kind of, you know, just a gentle hand, or obviously, you know, taking their body language into account. If they're not wanting that, if they're backing away from you, you need to pay attention to that and not just, you know, kind of force yourself into their personal space. But that touch can be really powerful and impactful. And like you said, just, you know, there's that instant connection there. And touch is one of those things that lasts, you know, till the end of, you know, Alzheimer's disease as one of the main ways that we can communicate with each other.
Yeah.
Listening, our favorite skill.
Yeah, it's our favorite because we have to work on it so much. I mean, most of us are not naturally good listeners, and it takes practice. It is not easy. You know, we tend to be thinking about what we're going to say in response without really listening to what's being said. And as we talked earlier about language declining, it's going to be more difficult for our loved ones to get the words. It's going to take longer, and the words they use may not be the words that they intend. But if we're observing, we're going to pick up the message, whether the words are accurate or not. So I like this image because to me it communicates. The man is struggling to express himself, and the woman is just very patient. And she still has, she's in full view. She's waiting. She has gentle, appropriate touch. And so it's listening for words, and it's listening for emotions. That's what makes the difference. And then once we perceive the emotions and we can affirm that, let them know that we've heard it, then we can move on to another topic, another message.
Absolutely. Yeah. Listening this step cannot be skipped. All right. And the final one, focusing on remaining skills. And what do we mean by that?
So as the disease progresses, their ability to perform tasks, to carry on the activities that they've always loved doing. There may be routines. So for example, in this image, just reading the newspaper, that may be a daily morning ritual of breakfast and newspaper. But reading is part of the language skill that's declining. And so the newspaper may not work after a while. So we have to be aware of when certain activities don't work anymore and find a substitute. The example that we often use when we talk about activities is jigsaw puzzles. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us like to put together jigsaw puzzles. And you know, back in the day, we might have done those 2,000 piece puzzles that are real small and the colors are intricate, and it's a real challenge. But with declining eyesight, spatial recognition, even color distortion makes that more challenging. And so we have to adjust. So instead of the 2,000 piece puzzle, we may go down to a 500 piece puzzle where they're a little bigger and the image is a little simpler. And then over time, that's not going to work. And so eventually we get down to the 100 piece, the 50 piece, and they're real big. So it's adjusting to their present ability and finding a way to engage at the level of their current skill.
Yeah, we did a lot of puzzles for a time, and what we started doing, as well as what you mentioned, which is less pieces, bigger pieces. I would keep the edges intact and keep a lot of the puzzle intact and just take out a few pieces, and we'd work on those few pieces together. And those few pieces might take half an hour, but as long as she wasn't frustrated or struggling and it was kind of a fun thing we were just kind of doing together, oh, let's see if this piece fits there. It was much more manageable if only 5 pieces were taken out and we were just kind of messing with those than if the table was full of all kinds of pieces that, neither of us knew which way they go. So there's lots of ways that you can adapt favorite activities. You don't need to, the first thing, if they can't do something, doesn't have to be take that activity away. It's let's look and see if we've exhausted all of our options of how we can adjust this.
Yeah, great.
And I think with communication, we often think about, okay, having a conversation is the way that we communicate. But as the words are getting fewer, I think these activities become very important, especially for other family members or friends that might not be around all the time and might feel awkward or not know how to communicate with our loved one anymore. And I think finding an activity that people can just kind of do side by side, whether it's art, which I know you love, Ben, talking about and doing, memories in the making, or cutting coupons, looking at photos, sorting things, folding things. If we're just kind of sitting side by side doing something together, we both feel like we're engaged in something meaningful, and we might have a little conversation here or there, but there's not as much pressure to just sit down and have a conversation like maybe we used to. But we just need to adjust the way that we are able to connect and just spend time with each other. And these activities can be huge in that.
And when we're the primary caregiver, we can plan for things that other people can step in and do because people want to help. They just don't know how. And so when we have the workshop on meaningful activities, we talk about an activity box. So a container of some kind, a box, a basket, whatever it is, where we have pre-planned activities that we know our loved one enjoys, that work in their present stage. And so it's easy to pull those out when somebody comes to visit to spend an hour with our loved one while we go take a nap, for example. That really helps us and allows other people to maintain that connection with their family or friend.
Absolutely. All right, so our keys to success here.
So lots of things that we may habitually do that don't work anymore. They might have worked in the past, and decades of relationship, we have these habits, but when they're not working, we need to find other things. So we may try to reason with our loved ones, but it doesn't work because their ability to reason, as I mentioned, when their frontal lobes are damaged, their rational thought, their ability to think logically is just going away. So we don't reason. And so if they're saying something that's completely irrational, unreal, it doesn't do any good to reason or argue. I'm simply going to agree and go along. Improvise, as I mentioned earlier, the ability to do improv is a skill that we can learn and that can make a big difference in the time that we spend with our loved one. Similarly, we don't argue over something, try to convince them of our point of view, or confront them over something that they did that may have been inappropriate. It's not going to help. It's going to make things worse when it may be just discouraging. I remember one incident. I totally blew it with Judy. I was driving to a restaurant, and we pulled up to the restaurant and there was no place to park. And so I went on by and she said, "What are you doing?" And we had friends in the car. And so I'm embarrassed. And so later I said, when you said, "What are you doing?" that was really embarrassing to me. Well, for her, it crushed her. She was I just watched her go into herself. She was so discouraged. So that doesn't help.
Yeah.
So we want to find techniques, skills that work. So arguing and confronting simply don't work. Reminding our loved ones all the time doesn't work. What we can do is talk about things. Let's say there's a doctor's appointment coming up. And so I don't want to say, "Now remember, we've got this appointment tomorrow." But I can say, "Oh, I just remembered, we're going to go to the doctor tomorrow." So I'm talking about what's in my head instead of directing it at my loved one.
I like that.
Similarly, we don't question their recent memory. We don't test them. I call this a test. If we ask our loved one, "What did you have for breakfast?" That oftentimes we can't answer that. We call that an open-ended question. And that can be very difficult for our loved ones to answer. Is it important that they remember what they had for breakfast? I submit it's not. So we don't test. It just makes them anxious, and it makes their cognitive process even more difficult. What do we do when we're getting blamed for something that we know we didn't do? The doctor's appointment, it's time to start getting ready. And she says, "What doctor's appointment? You didn't tell me." And I know I told her, at least 3 times, and I want to say that because it's so frustrating and I don't want to be blamed for something I didn't do. Not going to help. And so instead I accept the blame. "I am so sorry. I thought I told you." And then move on. And if things aren't working, if our loved one's getting agitated, her frustration level's going off the chart, then it's time to distract and redirect to something else. I know that Judy loves anything with color. So that might be sunrise, sunset, flowers, you name it, fabric, anything with color she's interested in. And so I can say, "Oh my gosh, look at that. And let's go take a look at, or let's go for a walk and look at the sunset." So that's distracting and redirecting. That's based on everything I know about her, the decades that we've been together that inform me of ways to distract her. And then if all else fails, and the tension, the agitation we just can't find a way to diffuse that, we may need to leave the room. Especially if our loved one's becoming physically aggressive and we're concerned about our own safety or their safety, it may be time to leave the room and have a cooling off period. But we want to do it in a smooth and gentle way, not stomp off and slam the door behind us, because that's going to communicate frustration, anger. And so the example that I often give is I might say, "Hold on, I need to go move the laundry." And I go out to the laundry room and I stand there and all I do is breathe. Take time, slow my heart rate, think about what I'm going to do. And then when I walk back in, I start over and I say, "Hi." Smile, open body language, start over.
Yeah, that reset button is really powerful. I remember, and I'm sure there was a time for you too, Ben, I first, early as a caregiver, long time ago, first saw this list, especially the don'ts, tended to focus on that and thought, I'm doing everything all wrong. I'm doing all of these every day. Because that's what we do, right? We're not born caregivers. We're not born with these skills. And so it took me years, if I'm being honest, of adjusting, and always, never perfect still. But it's a total shift in your perspective, in your, approach. And it's not something that happens overnight. There's definitely a light bulb moment that went off when I saw this list for the first time. And I thought, okay, I have some work to do, and work in talking to other family members that were caregivers as well, because it's definitely a team effort. So, don't beat yourself up if you seeing this and you're thinking, oh my goodness, these are things I do on a daily basis. It's hard, and, we all do them. We all make mistakes, and we all are just trying to do the best we can. But the more that we are able to get to those do's, the better experience we will have overall. I think that's what we need to keep in mind. It's not just, it's just about bettering the experience for everyone involved.
Yeah, we talked about those 5 steps in the compassionate approach. We also call those skills.
Yeah.
Those are things that we can learn.
Yeah.
And some of them are harder than others, but we can learn them. It takes practice, and practice, by definition, means that we still have room to improve because we still make mistakes, and so we keep working at it.
Absolutely. And that's why we repeat these so often in our classes. We talk about these all the time, because, just like with anything, a sport or, a task that we're trying to get better at, it does take that repetition. It takes kind of pounding it into our brains that this is the direction we need to go in. So, but it doesn't make it any less difficult. And we all need to give ourselves some grace.
I wanted to mention that we've got a really great handout that we
I put it in the comments.
Caring Conversations.
Thank you.
I see you just did that. Great. Really, really useful tool, and something that you can share with friends and family to help them understand some of the principles of communication that really, really make a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, that link is in the comments. Please check it out. And we have other handouts on our website as well. And we have lots of other classes coming up. We're always having new classes. So check out, I'll put our link here in the comments as well to go and check out our classes. We have a series called Savvy Caregiver starting tomorrow. So, but we do this almost monthly. We'll probably not be doing it in December, but starting in the new year as well. We have what we call 4 weeks to better memory starting tomorrow. It's a 4 weeks, 2 hours a week class. That's really, really fun. Lots of brain health tips and memory enhancement tips. It's not too late to sign up. You can go sign up on our website for that. We've got some classes on managing stress and brain health, and how to keep the holidays a little more dementia friendly. And I wanted to put a special class Ben and I are going to do in December in the comments as well. We're going to do a workshop over Zoom on communication. So it'll be kind of similar to what we've done here today, but it will be much more interactive because it'll be over Zoom. So we'd really encourage any care partners, families, friends to join us for that. Because we'd love to see your face. We love doing this over Facebook, but we also, I think, having another format where we can all see each other a little more like we're in person with each other is really beneficial as well. Our walk is coming up in a couple weeks. Of course, it's virtual. We're unable to go to Angel Stadium like we love to do every year, but out of, trying to keep everyone safe this year, you'll be walking in your neighborhood or at your home. So it's really easy because you don't have to go anywhere. You can even walk on a treadmill if you want. So you can walk or run. The most important thing is, just join a team or sign up. You can donate and you can raise money if you'd like, but we just love to have you, kind of with us in spirit as part of our community. So we would really love it if you would be able to join up and get your friends to sign up as well. And finally, we wanted to mention one of our community partners, Family Caregiver Resource. They provide a lot of services for family caregivers. They have information, caregiver assessments and planning, counseling, education, support groups, respite. They have lots of services in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. If you think that you could benefit, please do check out their website, and I'll put them in the comments as well. They're a great community partner of ours. And finally, our resources. Of course, we have our helpline. Give us a call Monday through Friday. If you happen to leave a voicemail, you will get a call back. So please do leave us a voicemail. You can call for any reason. If you have a question, if you need a referral, if you just need someone to talk to, someone to bounce an idea or a situation off of, Our helpline specialists are amazing. They're super compassionate and caring, and they just have so much knowledge to offer. So we really would encourage you to call our helpline, as well as visit our website for all of our upcoming events. And thank you again to Crown Cove for sponsoring this month's Facebook Lives. We really appreciate your support. And thank you to all of you who spent some time with us this morning. We know it's going to be a crazy busy day for all of us, so we really appreciate you being with us today. Any final words, Ben?
Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate you hosting these talks. It's just really a joy for me.
Absolutely. All right, we'll see you all next time. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.